Please. You should have taken the money, Victor Hale said, standing over the young man bleeding on the concrete floor. Ethan Carter looked up through the pain. Please. Ribs cracked, breathing in broken pieces. And he saw his father's motorcycle lying on its side where they had knocked it. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He said the only thing a man like him could say. This garage isn't for sale. Not today. Not ever. Victor laughed and walked out. He thought that was the end. He had no idea it was only the beginning. If this story moves you, if you believe that some things in this world are still worth fighting for, please subscribe to our channel right now and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The alarm went off at 5:15 every morning, and Ethan Carter always beat it by 10 minutes. Not because he was eager, not because the money was good, but because his father had done the same thing for 35 years, and somewhere in the muscle memory of waking before sunrise, Ethan felt like the old man was still close. Like the ritual itself was a conversation between them that words could never hold. He was 25 years old, lean and fair-haired, with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails and a quiet kind of stubbornness that people sometimes mistook for shyness until they pushed him too far. He had been running Carter Auto Repair alone for 14 months. 14 months since the funeral. 14 months since everyone he knew, friends, cousins, his father's old business contacts, sat him down one by one and delivered the same message with different levels of gentleness. Sell the garage, Ethan. Take what you can get. Start over somewhere. His aunt had framed it as love. Your father would want you to live your life, not be buried in that place. His high school friend Marcus had framed it as practicality. Man, the roof is caving in. The equipment is 15 years old. You're already losing money every single month. His father's old accountant, a soft-spoken man named Gerald, who had kept the books for 20 years, had framed it as math. He laid the numbers out on a yellow legal pad. Revenue versus expenses versus debt. He put his pen down quietly at the end of his presentation and said, "I'm sorry, son. The numbers just don't lie." Ethan had listened to all of them. Then he had thanked them. Then he had gone back to work. Because there was something none of them could put on a legal pad or calculate into a spreadsheet, and it sat in the middle of the shop floor under an old canvas tarp. And it was the reason Ethan Carter could not walk away from that garage, even when every rational voice in his life told him to. His father's Harley Davidson. Robert Carter had started the motorcycle 3 years before he died. It was a 1,978 shovelhead frame. Stripped and rebuilt from bare metal. And Robert had worked on it the way some men work on prayers, slowly. Carefully. During the quiet hours when the shop was closed and the world wasn't asking anything of him. He never told Ethan what the motorcycle was for. He just worked on it. And then one February morning he had a stroke while opening the garage doors, and he was gone before the ambulance arrived, and the Harley sat unfinished in the middle of the floor where it still was today. Ethan didn't touch it at first. He just worked around it. But somewhere in those first months of running the shop alone, he came to understand what it was. It wasn't a motorcycle. It was a promise his father had made to himself and never had the chance to keep. And Ethan had decided, without telling anyone, because it was the kind of decision that didn't survive being spoken out loud, that he was going to finish it. That finishing his father's motorcycle and keeping his father's garage alive were the same act of faithfulness. So every morning at 5:15, before the first customer arrived, before the phone started ringing, before the day demanded anything of him, Ethan would pull back the tarp and work on the Harley for 30 minutes. His hands on his father's work, quiet and deliberate. That was the life Victor Hale was about to walk into and destroy. Victor Hale was not the kind of man who announced himself by being loud. That was what made him dangerous. He was 53 years old, silver-haired, and dressed in the kind of clothes that were understated on purpose, a way of saying that real money doesn't need to advertise itself. He had built his first commercial strip out of a parking lot deal in Dallas when he was 31, and he had been building ever since. Ease. Not always cleanly, but always successfully. His current project was a highway corridor development in Silver Creek. Ease. 15 miles of commercial frontage that would eventually connect two growing suburbs and generate, by Vaux's own private estimates, somewhere between $40 and $60 million in lease income over the next decade. Ease. He had already acquired 11 of the 14 properties he needed. Ease. Carter Auto Repair was one of the 3 remaining. Ease. It sat at a critical intersection, the geometric center of his development plan, and its location meant that without it, the flow of the entire corridor was compromised. Ease. Victor needed that land the way a surgeon needs a specific instrument. Ease. Not approximately. Exactly. He had done his research on Ethan Carter the way he did research on every acquisition target. His age, financial situation, emotional vulnerability. Ease. He knew about the father's death. He knew about the debt. Ease. He knew the roof needed replacing, and the hydraulic lift in Bay 2 had been repaired with parts from a salvage yard and was going to fail completely within the next 6 months. Ease. Victor believed, based on everything he knew, that this would be an easy conversation. Ease. He arrived on a Tuesday morning in a silver sedan, drove past the 2 pickup trucks in the parking lot, and walked through the open garage doors with his hand extended and a smile on his face that he had practiced until it looked genuine. Ease. Ethan was under a Ford F-150, running a diagnostic on the transmission. Ease. He heard the footsteps, rolled out from under the truck, and stood up. Ease. He was wiping his hands on a shop rag when Victor introduced himself. Ease. Ethan Carter? I'm Victor Hale. I'm a developer. I've been acquiring property along the 87 corridor for a commercial project, and I believe your garage sits in a location that would be extremely valuable to both of us. Ease. Ethan looked at him. You want to buy the shop? I want to make you an offer that frankly exceeds what any bank assessment would put this property at. Victor named a number. Ease. It was a real number, generous by any reasonable standard. More than Ethan would see from the business in 3 years of operation. Ease. Ethan folded the shop rag over his arm and looked at the number on the card Victor held out. Ease. Then he looked at the Harley under its tarp. I'm not selling, he said. Ease. Victor kept smiling. I understand the emotional attachment. Ease. This was your father's business. I respect that. But I want you to think about what you're turning down. Ease. You could take this offer and go anywhere. Start fresh. Ease. Build something new. I'm already building something, Ethan said. Ease. Right here. Victor studied him for a moment. Something shifted slightly in his expression, so subtle that most people would have missed it. Ease. A recalibration, an adjustment of approach. Takes some time, Victor said. Ease. Think it over. My number's on the card. He shook Ethan's hand. Ease. His grip was firm and pleasant. He walked back to his car. Ease. And that was the moment, though, Ethan didn't know it yet, that the pressure campaign began. Ease. It started with small things. 3 days after Victor's visit, Ethan called his primary parts supplier to place a routine order. Ease. He was told politely but firmly that his account had been flagged for review and no orders could be processed until the review was complete. Ease. He had been ordering from that supplier for 2 years. There had never been a problem. He called back the next day. Ease. He was told the review was still pending. He called a secondary supplier. Ease. Same story, different words. He drove 40 miles to a parts distributor in the next county and paid cash, which cost him an extra $100 in time and fuel he couldn't really afford. Ease. The parts he needed for a brake job arrived 3 days late, and the customer, a retired school teacher named Mrs. Ease. Finch, who depended on her car to get to her twice-weekly dialysis appointments, had to make other arrangements and didn't come back. Ease. That week, 2 other long-standing customers canceled appointments with no explanation. Ease. Ethan found out later, through his neighbor, that they had received anonymous phone calls suggesting Carter Auto Repair was under investigation for insurance fraud. Ease. There was no investigation. There had never been any investigation. Ease. But the rumor had been planted. Ease. And rumors in a small town spread through the water the same way poison does, tasteless. Ease. Invisible. Ease. And lethal by the time anyone notices. Ease. Then the city inspector arrived. Ease. She was a thin woman with a clipboard and a professional manner, and she spent 4 hours going through the garage with a level of thoroughness that Ethan had never seen in 14 years of watching his father deal with routine inspections. She cited the hydraulic lift in Bay 2. The one Ethan already knew was degraded, as well as a ventilation issue in the back storage area that had apparently been acceptable for the previous 2 inspections, but was now a code violation. She also flagged a fire extinguisher that was for 3 months past its service date. The total remediation cost was going to be somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000. Ethan didn't have $8,000. He had $4,200 and $60 in the business account, and 3 outstanding invoices he was hoping to collect by the end of the month. He sat on the edge of the workbench after the inspector left, and he looked at his father's Harley, and he thought very clearly and very carefully about what was happening. This wasn't bad luck. He was a mechanic. He understood systems. He understood cause and effect. And every single thing that had gone wrong in the past 10 days had a pattern to it, a designed, deliberate pressure being applied at precisely the points where he was most vulnerable. His supplies, his reputation, his compliance costs. Someone was engineering his failure, and Ethan already knew who. Samuel Reed lived in the house directly behind the garage. He was 71 years old, a retired postal worker who had been friends with Robert Carter for 30 years. He kept a vegetable garden. Attended the same church he'd attended since 1987. And watched the garage the way a man watches something he loves from a respectful distance. He had known Ethan since Ethan was 4 years old, sitting on Robert's shoulders during the 4th of July parade. When Samuel knocked on the side door of the garage that Thursday evening, Ethan was sitting at his father's old desk going through bills. He looked up, and Samuel looked at him for a long moment. And then he came in and sat down across from the desk without being invited. Which told Ethan that this wasn't a social call. How bad is it? Ethan told him. The suppliers. The rumors. The inspector. The numbers. Samuel listened without interrupting. He had a way of listening that was old and patient, the kind of listening that doesn't reach for solutions while you're still talking, but just holds what you're saying with full weight and attention. When Ethan finished, Samuel was quiet for a moment. Victor Hale, he said. Not a question. I think so. Not think, it's him. He's done this before. He did it to a family on the east side of the county 3 years ago. A Vietnamese couple running a nail salon. He cut their supply contracts, got a health inspector in there twice in 1 month, spread a rumor about the husband having a criminal record. They sold inside of 6 weeks. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, exactly. Something more like clarity. The specific, useful kind of anger that doesn't shake your hands but steadies them. What do I do? He asked. Samuel leaned forward. You document everything. Every call, every inspection, every date, every inspector's name. Every customer who cancels, you call them and ask why, and you write down what they say. Every rumor you hear, you trace it back as far as you can, and you write down who told who. That's it? That's the foundation, Samuel said. You can't fight this kind of man with your fists or your pride. You fight him with evidence, because what he's doing is illegal interference with business, defamation, potentially bribery of public officials if he's getting those inspectors in here through his connection. But none of that matters if you can't prove it. Ethan nodded slowly. You sound like you know something about this kind of thing. Samuel looked at him steadily. I know something about a lot of things, he said. I know that men like Victor Hale have been operating in this country for a long time. And I know they don't lose often, but when they lose hard. He paused. You start documenting. I'll help you where I can. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and started toward the door. Samuel, Ethan said. The old man stopped. My dad trusted you more than almost anyone. He used to say you were the most quietly capable man he'd ever known. Ethan paused. What did he mean by that? Samuel turned around. For a moment, something passed across his face that Ethan couldn't quite read, something old and complicated, like a chapter from a book someone had thought was finished. Your father was a good man, Samuel said. He minded his business and he took care of people, and he never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. He looked at Ethan steadily. You're a lot like him. That's both a blessing and a problem right now. He left before Ethan could ask anything else. For the next 3 weeks, Ethan documented everything. He bought a composition notebook and dated every entry. He recorded the names of the suppliers who had refused his orders and the exact language they used. He documented the customers who had canceled, and when they were willing to talk to him, what they had been told and by whom. He photographed the garage every morning before opening the condition of the equipment, the inventory, everything, creating a visual record that could not be disputed. He called his insurance company when they sent a letter requesting a full audit of his business practices. He cooperated completely, professionally, and documented every exchange. The audit, when it concluded, found nothing. He also kept working. This was not small. This was the hardest part. Because the garage's income was declining not catastrophically, but measurably, week over week, as the slow erosion of his reputation and his supply chain worked against him. He cut his own salary. He stopped buying anything he didn't absolutely need. He called in old favors to get parts through back channels when his primary suppliers remained unavailable. He worked 16-hour days and fell asleep at the desk some nights without meaning to. But he didn't close, not for a single day. Marcus, his old friend, came by one Saturday afternoon and watched Ethan work for a while before he finally said, "Man, why are you doing this to yourself? Take the deal. Start over. You don't have to carry your dad's whole life on your back." Ethan kept working on the engine in front of him. He didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, "You know what my dad used to tell me when I was a kid and I wanted to quit something? He used to say, 'Ethan, any fool can walk away.' That's the easiest thing in the world. What's hard is standing there." Marcus was quiet. "I'm not carrying his whole life," Ethan said. "I'm standing there. That's all." Marcus left without saying anything else. But Ethan noticed, a week later, that Marcus had sent 3 of his coworkers to the garage for oil changes, and none of them had mentioned it like it was a favor. They'd just come in like normal customers, which was somehow more meaningful. That was Silver Creek. Small gestures that carried enormous weight. Victor Hale called on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after his first visit. The voice on the phone was still pleasant, still even. But there was something underneath it that hadn't been there before, a precision, an edge, like some pressing a bruise to test exactly how much it hurt. "I heard you've had some difficulties," Victor said. "I've been managing," Ethan said. "I'm calling because I want to revise my offer. I'm willing to go 10% higher than my original number." "That's considerably above market value, Ethan. I'd encourage you to take this seriously." "I take my business seriously," Ethan said. "That's why I'm keeping it." A pause on the other end of the line, longer than it needed to be. "I'd hate to see things get worse for you," Victor said. Running a small business in this economy is genuinely difficult. Especially when you're dealing with supply issues, regulatory scrutiny. I'm sure the stress is significant." Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. "Are you threatening me?" he asked, quietly, evenly. Because he wanted the answer on the record, and he had already hit the record button on his phone before picking up. "Absolutely not," Victor said, smooth as polished stone. "I'm expressing concern as a businessman who understands the challenges of the market." "I'm keeping the garage," Ethan said. "Don't call again." He hung up. He sat there for a full minute, his hand still on the phone, and the recorded audio file already saved to the cloud account he had set up for exactly this purpose. Then he went back to work. 3 days later, the insurance company sent a cancellation notice. Not a review, a cancellation. Effective in 30 days. Without liability insurance, the garage could not legally operate. Without operating, there was no income. Without income, there was no mortgage payment. Without mortgage payment, there was foreclosure. The chain was clean, logical, and devastating. Ethan read the letter twice, then he called Samuel. They've pulled the insurance, he said. There was a long pause on Samuel's end. Please, come over, Samuel said. When Ethan got to Samuel's house, the old man was sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a look on his face that Ethan hadn't seen before. He's not worried exactly, more like a man who has been watching a situation develop and has finally arrived at the moment he knew was coming. Sit down, Samuel said. Ethan sat. He's running out of patience, Samuel said. The insurance is a deadline. He's telling you have 30 days. After that, he doesn't have to do anything else. The law does his work for him. I know that, Ethan said. Do you have a lawyer? I can't afford a lawyer. I know someone, Samuel said. A woman in Austin who handles exactly this kind of predatory business interference. She's done this work for 20 years. She owes me a conversation. Ethan looked at him. What does that mean? Owes you a conversation. Samuel didn't answer that directly. He just said, let me make a call. In the meantime, you keep documenting every single day. He stood up and walked to the window, and he stood there looking out at the garage for a long moment. Samuel, Ethan said, who are you? I mean, really? My dad said you were quietly capable. An attorney in Austin owes you a conversation. You talk about men like Victor Hale, like you've been watching them for a long time. He paused. Who were you before Silver Creek? The old man was quiet for a very long moment. Then he said, I was someone who understood, a long time ago, that the world is full of men who use power to take what doesn't belong to them. And I spent a part of my life in communities where people had decided they weren't going to allow that. Not for their brothers, not for people they respected. He turned around. I left that life because I wanted peace. I wanted a garden and a church and my own quiet corner of the world. And I've had it. For 22 years, I've had it. He looked at Ethan directly. But your father was my friend. And you are your father's son. And what's happening to you is wrong in a way I cannot sit quietly by and watch. What are you going to do? Ethan asked. Samuel picked up his phone from the kitchen counter. An old one, not the newest model, but functional. I'm going to make some calls, he said, starting with the attorney. And then he paused, and something shifted in his eyes, something that made Ethan feel suddenly and inexplicably safer than he had felt in months, and then a few other calls. To people I haven't spoken to in a very long time. Ethan watched the old man dial. He didn't know yet what was coming. He didn't know that Samuel Reed's name still carried weight in communities that stretched across 12 states. He didn't know that there were men out there, weathered, loyal men who had spent their lives building something that the world often misunderstood, who had never forgotten what Samuel had once meant to them. He didn't know that a single message from a quiet old man in Silver Creek, Texas, was about to move across the country like a current through wire. All Ethan knew, sitting at Samuel's kitchen table, with 30 days left before his father's garage became legally inoperable, was that he wasn't alone. And that was enough. For now. That night, alone in the garage after dark, Ethan pulled back the canvas tarp and looked at his father's Harley. He ran his hand along the frame, the cold metal, the deliberate work, the 35 years of his father's character, built into everything that had ever come through these doors. Every farmer who'd brought a tractor in during harvest season and left with it running clean. Every single mother who'd been quoted a fair price and not a dollar more. Every veteran on a fixed income who'd gotten honest labor from an honest man. This was the legacy. Not a building, not a plot of land on a highway corridor. A way of doing things. A belief that some places and some people should not be destroyed just because someone with money decided they were in the way. Ethan covered the Harley back up. He turned off the lights. He locked the garage and walked home through the dark. And somewhere across Texas, a phone was ringing. The attorney's name was Diana Reyes, and she called Ethan at 7:30 the next morning, before he had even unlocked the garage. He almost didn't answer. Unknown number, Austin area code, and he had enough problems without adding a telemarketer to his morning. But something made him pick up some instinct that had been sharpening itself over the past few weeks of fighting an invisible war. Ethan Carter? The voice was direct, unhurried, and carried the specific kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. Please, my name is Diana Reyes. Samuel Reed asked me to call you. Please. I have 45 minutes before my first client. Tell me everything. Please. So Ethan told her. Standing in the garage, one hand braced against his father's workbench, he went through the whole timeline. Please. The first visit from Victor, the supplier lockouts. Please. The rumors. The inspector. The insurance cancellation. Please. He talked for 22 minutes straight, and Diana Reyes didn't interrupt once. Please. When he finished, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Please. You've been documenting this? She asked. Every day. These dates, names, recordings where I could get them legally. Please. I've got a cloud folder with over 60 entries. Send it to me today. Please. All of it. She paused. What you're describing is textbook predatory business interference. Please. The insurance cancellation alone, if we can connect it to Hale through the adjuster or the policy review request, is potentially actionable under Texas Business and Commerce Code. Please. The supplier lockouts are harder, but not impossible if there's a pattern. Please, can you actually stop him? Ethan asked, not with hope. Please. With the level, honest question of a man who has been disappointed before and doesn't have room for it again. I can build a case, Diana said. I can't promise you a timeline, and I can't promise you that a case wins before your 30 days are up. Please. What I can promise you is that Victor Hale does not want this in a courtroom. Please. Men like him use pressure because it's invisible. The moment it becomes a legal proceeding with his name on documents, the calculation changes completely. Ethan absorbed that. What does this cost? Samuel vouches for you, she said simply. Please. We'll figure out the fees when this is over. Right now, send me that folder. Please. She hung up. Ethan stood there for a moment. Something that had been pulled tight in his chest for weeks loosened, just slightly, not enough to feel like relief, but enough to feel like air. Please. Like maybe the walls weren't quite as close as they had seemed the night before. Please. He sent Diana the folder before he opened the garage for the day. Please. Then he got to work, because the cars still needed fixing, and the bills still needed paying, and despair was something Ethan Carter had decided he simply didn't have time for. Please. What he didn't know was that Victor Hale was watching. Not personally. Victor didn't do anything personally that he could have done through a layer of insulation. Please. But he had people, a local property manager named Denny Walsh, who drove past the garage twice a day and reported back. Please. A contact at the insurance company who had flagged the policy cancellation and mentioned in a professional and entirely deniable way that the account had come to his attention through a mutual business interest. Please. Small threads in a large and carefully constructed web. Please. Victor got the report that morning. Please. Garage opened on time. Please. Owner arrived as usual. Please. No sign of imminent closure. Please. He sat with that for a moment. He had expected Ethan to break by now. Please. The math didn't support continued resistance. No insurance in 30 days meant no operation. And without operation, there was no income. And without income, there was no fight. Please. It was supposed to be simple. Clean. The kind of pressure that didn't leave fingerprints. Please. But Ethan Carter was still opening his doors every morning. And something about that fact irritated Victor in a way that was starting to move beyond business. He's made contact with someone, his property manager reported. He's legal? Maybe. I saw him photographing documents this morning on his phone. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Find out who. He hung up and made 2 calls of his own, one to his attorney. One to a man in Dallas who specialized in making problems more complicated in ways that were difficult to trace. The second call lasted 4 minutes. Victor didn't feel good about it exactly. He wasn't a violent man by inclination. He was a businessman, and violence was inefficient, and it left the kind of evidence that lawyers found useful. But Ethan Carter had moved past the point of being a business problem and was starting to feel like a statement. Like defiance. And Victor Hale had not spent 20 years building his empire by allowing defiance to go unanswered. I want him to understand, Victor said into the phone. Not permanently, just clearly. The man on the other end of the line said he understood perfectly. The call came into Diana's office that same afternoon. Not from Ethan. From a title company in Silver Creek that had 3 weeks earlier filed a lien against Carter Auto Repair on behalf of a creditor Ethan had never heard of. A company called Meridian Property Holdings, a shell corporation that Diana confirmed after 40 minutes of research, traced back through two holding companies to a management firm that had Victor Hale's name on a 2019 filing. He's, she called Ethan immediately. There's a lien on your property, she said. He's filed 3 weeks ago. Did you know about this? Ethan felt the floor shift under him. No, nobody told me. They weren't required to notify you until it reached a certain stage. It's a claimed debt of $11,000 from a company that doesn't appear to have any legitimate business relationship with your garage. Which means either someone made a clerical error of spectacular proportions. Or someone fabricated a debt, Ethan said. Yes. He sat down hard on the edge of the workbench. An insurance cancellation he could fight. Rumor campaigns he could document. But a lien on the property, even a fraudulent one, meant that he couldn't refinance, couldn't borrow against the garage, couldn't use the property as any kind of financial leverage while he was fighting everything else. Victor had just cut off the last escape route. Can you fight it? Ethan asked. Absolutely. A fraudulent lien is actually one of the cleaner fights we can have. We file a motion to release. We subpoena the documentation of the supposed debt. And when Meridian can't produce anything legitimate, the lien dissolves. But Diana paused, and the pause carried weight. That process takes 4 to 6 weeks minimum. You have 30 days on the insurance. The math settled on him like a physical weight. So even if you win the lien case, I might already be shut down by the time it's resolved. That's his strategy, Diana said. He's not trying to win any one fight. He's trying to make sure that even when you win, you lose. Exhaust your time, your resources, your energy, until surrender is the only rational option. Another pause. He's very good at this, Ethan said. After he hung up, he sat in silence for a long time. Not despair, he had promised himself he wouldn't go there. But a deep, honest reckoning with the situation. Victor had money. Attorneys. Connections. And 20 years of experience dismantling people who stood in his way. Ethan had a documentation folder. A lawyer who was working on faith. A 71-year-old retired postal worker in his corner. And 30 days. He was losing. He needed to be honest with himself about that. He was losing, and losing badly, and the only question was what he was going to do about it. He pulled the tarp back from the Harley and looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked up a wrench and went to work on the engine. Not because it was going to solve anything, because his hands needed something to do while his mind worked through what came next. He was still working 2 hours later when Samuel knocked on the door. The old man came in and stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, watching Ethan work. He didn't say anything for a full minute. Which was one of the things Ethan had come to understand about Samuel Reed. He never spoke before he was ready. And when he was ready, every word meant something. Diana called me, Samuel said. The lien, Ethan said, not looking up from the engine. Yes, he's going to win, Samuel. Ethan set down the wrench. He turned around and leaned against the workbench and looked at the old man directly, because he had decided that the one thing he was not going to do was pretend. I know you're helping me. I know Diana is helping me. I know I've got evidence and documentation and probably a legitimate legal case. But the clock runs out before the case does. And when the insurance lapsed, I have to close. And once I close, it's over. He knows that. That's the whole design. Samuel looked at him steadily. I know, so what do we do? Samuel was quiet for another moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, not reluctant careful. Like a man choosing tools from a toolbox. I told you I made some calls, he said. I started with Diana because the legal route has to be attempted. It has to be on record that you tried to fight this the right way. He paused. But I made other calls too, after Diana. Calls I haven't made in a very long time. Ethan waited. There are people out there who remember me, Samuel said. People I rode with a long time ago. People who built their lives around a set of principles that the world has never fully understood from the outside. But From the inside, please, come down to one thing: you do not allow a man to destroy someone who doesn't deserve it. Please, you do not stand by and watch. Ethan stared at him. Please, Samuel, what are you telling me? I'm telling you that I sent a message. Nights ago, Samuel met his eyes, and the message is traveling. To who? Samuel said the name quietly. The Hell's Angels. Please. The garage went completely silent. Ethan didn't move for a long moment. Please. He looked at the old man across from him, the vegetable garden, the church attendance, the Sunday mornings, and tried to reconcile all of it with what Samuel had just said. Please, you were. He started. I was, Samuel said. Please, for 12 years, a long time ago in a different chapter of my life. Please, I left honorably. I didn't run and I didn't betray anyone. Please, I simply told them I was done and why, and they respected it, because the one thing that community understands above all else is a man who knows his own mind. Please. Ethan ran his hand over his face. What does a message traveling mean? Please. It means that people are hearing about a young mechanic in Silver Creek, Texas, who is being destroyed by a corrupt developer because he refused to abandon his father's legacy. Please. And it means that some of those people are deciding whether that's the kind of thing they're going to stand by and watch happen. Please. And Ethan said, are they? Samuel looked at him with those steady, complicated eyes. Please. I don't know yet, he said. That's the honest answer. Please. I put out the message. What comes back is not something I can control. Please. These are proud people with their own lives and their own obligations. Please. I'm not owed anything. But your father was a man who fixed motorcycles for people without overcharging them, and who treated every human being who walked through those doors with dignity. And that story, that specific story, tends to matter. Please. Ethan looked at the Harley. He thought about his father. Please. The 35 years. Every farmer. Every truck driver. Every fixed income veteran who'd been treated right. Please. Okay, he said finally. Not with relief. Not with certainty. Just with the quiet acceptance of a man who has run out of better options and is choosing to trust someone who has earned it. Please. Okay, Samuel said. In the meantime, keep documenting. Please. Keep the doors open as long as you legally can, and don't tell anyone about this conversation. Please. He turned toward the door. Samuel, Ethan said. The old man stopped. Please. Thank you for whatever this is and for, I don't know. Please. For being what you were and still being here. Samuel nodded once. Please. Something moved briefly across his face, old and private and not entirely unhappy. Please. Then he left, and the garage was quiet again. Please. The next 8 days moved in two rhythms simultaneously. Please. The surface rhythm was ordinary and grinding. Please. Customers coming in. Please. Cars going up on the lift. Please. Invoices going out. Please. Ethan called his insurance company every other day to document that the cancellation was being contested, spoke twice more with Diana Reyes as she built the fraudulent lien case, and continued filling his documentation folder with everything Victor Hale did that could be traced and time-stamped. The customers who remained were loyal in the specific way that small-town loyalty works, not dramatic, not announced, just present. Earl Hutchins brought his wife's car for a brake job and paid in cash without being asked. The Delgado family from out on Route 9 sent 2 of their farm trucks in the same week. Mrs. Finch, the school teacher who had been driven away by the insurance fraud rumor, came back and apologized to Ethan personally, which he told her was completely unnecessary. And she looked at him with the firm expression of a woman who taught 40 years of 3rd grade and said, it is absolutely necessary. Young man. And you will accept it graciously. He did. Underneath all of that, invisible and building like pressure beneath the surface of the earth, the second rhythm was moving. He didn't know exactly what it was. He only knew it existed because of small signals. Samuel's manner, which had shifted from watchful to something more like, settled the specific stillness of a man who is waiting for something he now believes is coming. A phone call Samuel took on his porch at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, speaking quietly for 20 minutes. That left him with an expression Ethan couldn't quite interpret. The way Samuel would occasionally look down the highway in the direction from which the town entrance came, and then look away without explanation. Something was in motion. Ethan didn't ask. He kept working. On the ninth day, Victor Hale made his second personal visit. This time, he didn't come alone. He arrived with two men, not the suit and briefcase kind, but the other kind, wide-shouldered men who stood slightly behind and to either side of Victor, like human punctuation. The kind of punctuation that means something different from words. Ethan was in the middle of an alignment job when he heard the car. He didn't come out from under the hood. He waited until Victor walked in through the open bay doors and stopped at a distance that was deliberately inside the space that should have been Ethan's. And then Ethan straightened up and turned around and stood looking at the man with an expression that revealed absolutely nothing. You didn't take my calls, Victor said. I believe I was clear about that. You've been talking to an attorney, Victor said. His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. Diana Reyes out of Austin. She has a reputation for taking on cases that are, he paused, selecting the word with care, difficult to sustain financially over any length of time. So he knew about Diana. Of course he did. My legal representation is my own business, Ethan said. Ethan? Victor stepped forward. Not aggressively, more like the way a man steps forward when he wants to communicate genuine concern, and does it so smoothly that it takes a second to realize the concern is entirely performed. I want you to understand something. I don't enjoy this. The complications you've been experiencing, the business difficulties, I'm not a man who takes pleasure in someone else's hardship. No, Ethan said. You just cause it. Something flickered across Victor's face. Not quite anger. The cousin of anger. The feeling a man gets when someone says the exact true thing he was hoping to avoid having said out loud. I'm going to give you one more opportunity, Victor said. I'm prepared to go 15% above my original offer. Today, cash transaction, 30-day close. You walk away clean, with more money than this property has any rational right to generate, and you start whatever life you want somewhere else. He paused. Think about your father, Ethan. You think he would want to watch you sacrifice your health and your future for a building that's costing you more to keep than it's worth? That was the calculated strike, the one Victor had clearly held in reserve, because he understood that invoking a dead father was the kind of attack that either broke a person completely or didn't work at all. It didn't work. My father. Ethan said. Quietly and with perfect steadiness. Built this garage so that ordinary people would have one place they could go and trust that they weren't being cheated. So that a farmer with a broken-down truck during harvest didn't have to worry about being taken advantage of when he was already stretched thin. So that a widow on a fixed income could get her car fixed without being lied to about what it needed. He stopped. He looked at Victor with the specific level gaze of a man who has nothing left to lose and therefore nothing to fear. You are exactly the person my father spent his whole life trying to protect people from. So no, he would not want me to sell to you. He would want me to stand here until I couldn't stand anymore. The garage was absolutely silent. Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, I'm going to give you 72 hours to reconsider. After that, we're past the point of civilized conversation. He turned and walked out. His two men followed. Ethan stood still until he heard the car leave. Then he went to his desk. Opened his documentation folder. And wrote down the exact time. The exact words. And the fact that Victor Hale had arrived with two individuals who appeared to serve as physical intimidation. His hands were not shaking. He noticed that specifically. His hands were not shaking. He called Diana and left a voicemail describing the visit. Then he went back to the alignment job because the car was still on the lift and the customer needed it back by 4 o'clock. And Ethan Carter did not let his customers down. 48 hours later, the county assessor's office sent a revaluation notice. The property had been reassessed at a value 18% higher than its current assessed value. Which meant the property taxes would increase, which meant another layer of financial pressure in a situation where every layer was already bearing weight. Ethan put the notice on the desk next to the insurance cancellation. He called Diana. She confirmed that county assessment processes could be challenged, but that the challenge process took months and would likely not resolve before his other deadlines. Ease. He sat at his father's desk and looked at the ceiling. Ease. The leak he'd been managing with a bucket since March had been quiet for 2 weeks because the weather had been dry, but he could see the water stains spreading slightly, which meant the roof was getting worse whether it was raining or not. Ease. He thought about the numbers. He thought about the timeline. He thought about Diana's legal case, which was solid but slow. He thought about the lien which she was fighting, but which was still there. He thought about the insurance cancellation, now down to 22 days. He thought about Samuel's phone call at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night and the look on the old man's face afterward. He thought about the message that was traveling. He picked up his phone and called Samuel. The assessor sent a revaluation notice, he said. He's adding a new front. I know, Samuel said. I heard about it this morning. Samuel, the calls you made. I need to know, is there anything actually coming? Because I'm trying to be honest with myself about where I am and where I am is. I know where you are, Samuel said. And I know it's bad. Is there anything coming? Ethan asked again, not demanding. He's just asking. A pause on the other end. Yes, Samuel said. I believe there is. How much? More than I expected, Samuel said. And something in his voice, steady old man's voice, worn smooth by 22 years of quiet living, carried something new. Something that's unmistakably like awe. Ethan sat with that for a moment. Okay, he said. Keep the doors open, Samuel said. Whatever it costs. Keep the doors open. The call came 3 days later. Ethan was closing up the garage. Wiping down the workbench. The last of the evening light going flat and gray outside the open bay doors. When his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. The message was 3 words. We're coming, brother. Ethan stared at it. He didn't know the number. He didn't know the sender. He had never been called brother by a stranger. He took a screenshot and sent it to Samuel. Samuel called him back in 30 seconds. That's a chapter president, Samuel said, and his voice was doing that thing again, steady, but carrying something large underneath it. He's out of Houston. He rode with me for 6 years back when. I haven't spoken to him in 12 years. What does it mean? Ethan asked. How many people are we talking about? I'm still finding out, Samuel said. But Ethan, the message has gone further than I thought it would. Further than I honestly believed it could after this long. I'm getting responses from chapters I didn't contact directly. The Houston chapter apparently forwarded it to Dallas, and Dallas forwarded it to San Antonio and Oklahoma City. And he paused. Samuel, Ethan said. How many people? Another pause. I don't know the final number yet, Samuel said carefully. But I think you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that it's going to be significant. Ethan stood in the door of the garage. The Texas evening settled around him, quiet and warm and ordinary. Down the road, a truck passed. A dog barked somewhere in the neighborhood. The world proceeded with complete indifference to what was happening inside this small garage and this phone call and this strange, impossible thing that seemed to be building out of loyalty and memory and a 71-year-old man's quiet reputation. Samuel, Ethan said. My dad. About who you were? What you were? The old man was quiet for a moment. Your father fixed my motorcycle the first month I moved to Silver Creek, Samuel said. This was 22 years ago. The bike had a problem the previous shop had misdiagnosed twice and charged me $300 to not fix. Your father found the actual problem in 40 minutes, fixed it properly, and charged me $60 for the labor. When I asked him why so little, he said, because $60 is what it was worth. I'm not in the business of charging you for my ego. Another pause. I knew then that this was a man I was going to know for a long time. Ethan felt something move in his chest, deep and solid and warm. He never asked me directly, Samuel continued. But he was not a simple man, your father. He was a perceptive man. I think he understood more than he let on. He treated me like Samuel Reed, his neighbor. And that was the greatest kindness anyone had shown me since I left that life. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Okay, he said. I'll keep the doors open. You will, Samuel said. I know you will. The next morning, Victor Hale's man came. Not Victor himself. Not the two wide-shouldered men from the visit. This was someone different, a single individual in a plain sedan who drove into the parking lot at 7:15 in the morning, while the town was still mostly quiet. While Ethan was still doing his morning 30 minutes on the Harley before the first customer arrived. The man walked into the garage without knocking, which was itself a message about the kind of person he was and who had sent him. He was roughly 40, unremarkable in almost every way except for his eyes, which had the flat and deliberate quality of someone who has been paid to communicate things that cannot be written down. Mr. Hale would like you to know, the man said, without preamble or introduction, that his patience has concluded. The 72 hours passed yesterday. He's asked me to convey that the remaining obstacles to your situation resolving themselves have been identified and will be addressed in the next few days. Ethan stood up from where he'd been kneeling beside the Harley. He looked at the man across the garage. What does that mean? Ethan said. Quiet level. It means what it means, the man said. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone from the workbench and held it up so the man could clearly see he was recording. I'm going to need you to repeat what you just said clearly and directly for the record. Because what you just told me sounds like a threat, and I'd like to make sure I have it documented correctly. The man looked at the phone. Something shifted in his eyes, not fear, but the specific adjustment a person makes when they realize they have misjudged the situation they walked into. He turned around and walked out without another word. Ethan sent the recording to Diana within 90 seconds. Her reply came back in 4 minutes. This is escalating to criminal threat territory. I'm filing an emergency injunction today. Ethan read the message. Then he looked at the Harley. Then he looked at the door of the garage. He had 17 days left on the insurance. An emergency injunction might buy time. Might not. Victor had attorneys too, and the kind of money that made courts move differently than they moved for everyone else. But somewhere out there, something else was moving. Something that didn't care about courts or money or Victor Hale's 20 years of carefully maintained power. Something made of loyalty and road miles and the specific, unshakable moral code of people who had decided, long ago, that they would not let injustice stand when standing against it was within their power. Ethan Carter pulled the tarp back over his father's Harley. He walked to the garage doors and opened them wide to the morning. He had 17 days, and the sound of engines somewhere far away across the state of Texas was getting louder. Diana's emergency injunction landed in Victor Hale's attorney's inbox at 9:47 in the morning, and by noon, Victor knew about it. He read the filing summary with the specific stillness of a man who is genuinely surprised but trained never to show it. The injunction was requesting a temporary restraining order against any further interference with Carter Auto Repair's business operations, supplier relationships, and insurance standing, citing documented evidence of coordinated predatory interference under Texas Business and Commerce Code sections 17.46 and 15.05. It named Victor Hale specifically. It named Meridian Property Holdings. It named the fraudulent lien. It named everything. Victor put the papers down and called his attorney. How serious is this? He asked. Reyes is good, his attorney said. She doesn't file things she can't support. The lien documentation is going to be a problem. The paper trail on Meridian is thinner than it should be. If a judge looks at it the right way. I'm not paying you to tell me about problems, Victor said. I'm paying you to solve them. We can delay the injunction hearing. Motion to continue. Procedural objections, we buy 3, maybe 4 weeks. The insurance lapses in 17 days, Victor said. I just need 17 days. Then we delay, his attorney said. I'll file this afternoon. Victor hung up. He sat for a moment in his chair, and then he did something he rarely did. He let himself feel the irritation fully, the way you press on a bruise to remind yourself exactly where it is. This mechanic, this 25-year-old kid with cracked equipment and a leaking roof and a dead father's legacy, had managed to retain competent legal counsel, build a documented evidentiary record, ease, and survive 11 weeks of sustained pressure that should have broken him inside of 3 ease. It was impressive, in a way Victor would never have admitted out loud. Ease. But impressive didn't change the math. 17 days. Ease. The insurance lapses, the garage closes, and a closed business with a fraudulent lien and an outstanding tax assessment becomes a very different negotiation than an open one. Ease. Victor picked up the phone and made the call he had been avoiding. Ease. I need the timeline accelerated, he said. Whatever's been planned for Silver Creek. Ease. This week, not next. Ethan found out about the injunction delay the same way he found out about everything in this fight from Diana, who called him directly and told him the truth without softening it. Ease. They filed a motion to continue this morning, she said. Ease. Judge Caraway has it. Ease. He's not Victor's judge. Ease. Which is good. Ease. But he's also a procedural stickler. Ease. Which means he'll likely grant the continuance. Ease. We're probably looking at the hearing being pushed to 5, possibly 6 weeks from now. Ease. Ethan did the math without being asked. That's after the insurance lapses. Ease. Yes. So the injunction doesn't actually save the garage. Ease. Not in time, no. Diana paused, and he could hear her moving around her office, the sound of papers being shifted. Ease. What it does is put Victor Hale on record. It puts his name on a legal document alongside the word fraud, and it means that every move he makes from this point forward is being watched by a court. Ease. That matters. It constrains him. Does it stop him? Ease. Not completely. Ethan leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling and the water stain that had spread another 2 inches toward the light fixture. Ease. 15 days left on the insurance. A delayed injunction that wouldn't land in time. Ease. A fraudulent lien still sitting on the property. A county tax revaluation still pending. Ease, Diana, he said. I need you to be straight with me. Ease. Am I going to lose the garage? The pause was half a second too long to be comfortable. Ease. If we're fighting this purely through legal channels, the timing is very tight, she said. Ease. Victor has engineered this specifically so that the clock runs out before the courts can act. Ease. She stopped, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a quality he hadn't heard in it before, something that sounded almost like personal anger. Ease. It's one of the more sophisticated versions of this I've seen. Ease. He's done it before. He'll do it again. The law will eventually catch up with him, Ethan. Ease. But eventually may not be soon enough for your specific situation. I understand, Ethan said. Is there anything else? Anything I'm not aware of that might change the timeline? Ease. He thought about Samuel. He thought about the text message. Ease. We're coming, brother. He thought about a phone call at 10 in the evening and the sound of something large moving underneath Samuel's steady voice. Ease, maybe, he said. I'm not sure yet. Let me know, Diana said. Ease. And Ethan, don't give up. I know how this looks right now. Ease. But you have built one of the cleanest evidentiary records I've seen in 20 years of this work. Ease. Whatever happens with the garage, Victor Hale is going to answer for what he's done. Ease. I give you my word on that. That means something, Ethan said. Ease. And he meant it. After he hung up, he sat still for exactly 2 minutes. Ease. He allowed himself that 2 minutes of sitting with the full weight of how bad this was, without performing optimism or talking himself into anything. Ease. Just honest acknowledgement. He was probably going to lose the garage. Ease. The math said so. The timeline said so. 20 years of Victor Hale's expertise said so. Ease. Then the 2 minutes were up, and he stood up, and he went back to work. Ease. Samuel came over that evening without being called. Ease. He knocked twice and came in through the side door and stood at the edge of the workspace while Ethan finished torquing a bolt on the Harley's primary chain. Ease. You heard about the delay, Ethan said. Not a question. Ease. Diana called me, Samuel said. Then you know where we are. Ethan set down the torque wrench and straightened up and looked at the old man directly. Samuel, tell me what's actually coming. Not approximately. Ease. Not maybe. What do you actually know? Samuel looked at him for a moment. Ease. Then he walked over to the workbench and sat on the stool. At the end of it, the stool Ethan's father had kept there for exactly this kind of conversation, and folded his hands together. Ease. I know that chapter presidents from 7 states have been in contact with me or with each other about your situation over the past 2 weeks, Samuel said. Ease. I know that the Houston chapter is coming. San Antonio confirmed yesterday. Ease. Dallas confirmed this morning. I received a call 2 hours ago from a chapter in New Mexico I haven't spoken to in 15 years. Ethan stared at him. New Mexico. The message traveled further than I sent it, Samuel said. Please. Much further. The story, your father's story, this garage, it connected with something I didn't anticipate. Please. These are men who spent their lives building their own communities, their own legacies. Please. A man defending his father's life work against a corrupt developer. He stopped. He's looked at his hands. It's a story they understand in their bones. Please. How many people, Samuel? Give me a real number. The last count I had 3 hours ago was somewhere between 200 and 250. Please. But chapters are still confirming. It's still moving. He paused. Please. It could be significantly more. Ethan sat down on an overturned bucket because his legs needed a moment. Please. He looked at the floor of the garage, the concrete his father had swept every single morning for 35 years. Please. Why? He said, and he genuinely meant it, not rhetorically. Please. Why would that many people ride out for someone they've never met? Please. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Because it's not really about you, he said. Please. Not unkindly. Or it's not only about you. Every one of those men has a version of this story somewhere in their life. Please. A person or a place or a thing that someone tried to take from them using money and power, and the assumption that ordinary people can be broken down until they give up. He looked at Ethan. Please. You didn't give up. That matters to people. That kind of stubbornness, that specific refusal, it speaks a language. Those men understand better than almost anything else. Please. Ethan absorbed that. It took a moment to settle into something he could hold. When? He asked. Soon, Samuel said. Within days. Please. I'll know more tomorrow morning. He stood up from the stool. In the meantime, there's something you need to know. Please. His tone shifted. Just slightly. Just enough that Ethan felt the change before he understood it. Please. What? Ethan said. I got a call this afternoon from a man named Roy Tillman. Please. He runs a small engine repair out of Beaumont, knew your father years ago. Please. He said he heard from someone who heard from someone in Hale's operation. Samuel stopped, measured his next words carefully. That Victor is moving up his timeline. He's not waiting out the insurance anymore. He's planning something more direct. The air in the garage changed. What does more direct mean? Ethan said. I don't know exactly. Roy didn't have specifics, but Victor made a call 3 days ago to someone in Dallas who is not an attorney and not a businessman. And after that call, someone drove through Silver Creek twice in 1 day slow, looking at the garage. Ethan stood up. He's going to send people. I think so. I think he's decided that the legal strategy isn't closing fast enough, and he's going to make a more physical argument. The word physical landed in the room and stayed there. Ethan thought about the two wide-shouldered men who had stood behind Victor during the second visit. He thought about the flat-eyed man who had come alone at 7:15 in the morning with a message that couldn't be written down. He thought about what Victor had said. We're past the point of civilized conversation. I'm not going to run, Ethan said. I know that, Samuel said. And I'm not going to close the garage early and give him what he wants. I know that too. So what do I do? Samuel put his hand on Ethan's shoulder briefly, the specific gesture of an old man who has run out of words that are adequate to the moment and is communicating something more direct instead. You stay ready, Samuel said. And you know that you are not alone in this. Whatever happens in the next few days, you are not alone. The garage was quiet. Ethan locked up. He checked the doors twice. He drove home and set his phone to full volume on the nightstand. He didn't sleep well. They came on a Thursday morning. Ethan was in the middle of the Harley, making real progress now, the engine closer to complete than it had been since his father put the wrench down for the last time when he heard 3 vehicles pull into the parking lot. Not the sound of customers. Customers came one at a time, announced by a single engine. This was different. 3 doors closing in sequence. He stood, he wiped his hands. Victor Hale walked in first. And this time it was immediately, viscerally different. Victor's careful pleasantness, the practiced smile, the even voice, the performance of a reasonable businessman was entirely gone. What walked through the door of Carter Auto Repair that Thursday morning was the thing the pleasantness had been covering all along. A man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted and had decided he was done pretending otherwise. Behind him came four men, not the two from before. These four, and these were not assistants or property managers. These were the kind of men whose physical presence was itself a language, and the language said that conversation was no longer what this visit was for. His last chance, Victor said. He didn't sit down. He didn't extend his hand. He just stood in the middle of the garage and looked at Ethan with the specific cold certainty of someone who has already decided how this ends. Sign the transfer papers today. Right now. I have them in the car. You sign them. I give you the check I have sitting in my breast pocket, and you walk out of here with more money than this building will ever generate again. Ethan looked at Victor. He looked at the four men. He looked at the transfer papers that Victor was now pulling from an inside jacket pocket and setting on the hood of the car in Bay 1. Get out of my garage, Ethan said. Victor nodded once slightly, the way a man nods when he receives an answer he was expecting and has already prepared for. Gentlemen, he said. Two of the four men walked directly to the unfinished Harley. Ethan moved immediately 3 fast steps, putting himself between them and his father's motorcycle. His hands up, his voice sharp. Do not touch that. One of them looked at him. Not with malice, exactly. With the professional detachment of a man doing a job. Mr. Carter, Victor said from behind him, his voice back to something approaching reason. Step away from the motorcycle. Be sensible about this. That motorcycle belonged to my father, Ethan said. His voice was flat and hard, and he did not move. You put a hand on it, and I will. The first man put his hand on the Harley. Ethan grabbed his arm. What happened in the next 30 seconds was fast and brutal, and not something Ethan could have prevented with more skill or more courage. The man he grabbed was significantly larger than him, and the other 3 men moved in before Ethan could do anything with the initial contact. They pulled him back, hard, and he fought it because he couldn't do anything else. Because walking away quietly was not something his body would allow. And in the process of fighting men who outweighed him by a combined 400 pounds, he took 2 hits to the ribs the right side. The second one clearly, decisively wrong. A deep structural crack that he felt before he heard, and then felt everywhere at once in a white wall of pain that dropped him to one knee on the concrete floor of his father's garage. They knocked the Harley over. The sound of it, the frame his father had built, the engine Ethan had spent 14 months carefully completing, all of it hitting the concrete floor, cut through the pain and landed somewhere deeper. Somewhere that hurt in a way that had nothing to do with his ribs. He tried to get up. He couldn't get up. He stayed on one knee, his right hand on the floor. Breathing in partial and careful increments because any larger breath sent a white spike of pain through his entire right side. And he looked at the motorcycle lying on its side, on the concrete, and he could not do anything about it, and that was the worst part, the absolute helplessness of it. Victor stood over him, not touching him, just standing there, looking down at him with an expression that was, and this was the part Ethan would remember longest, the part that would sit in him like a splinter, not triumphant, not cruel, just satisfied, the specific satisfaction of a man completing a transaction. You should have taken the money, Victor said. Then he picked up the unsigned transfer papers from the hood of the car. He straightened them neatly. He folded them and put them back inside his jacket. He nodded to his men and they walked out, and then there was silence. The garage was absolutely silent. Ethan stayed on one knee. He breathed carefully, short, controlled, working around the pain. He looked at the Harley on its side. He looked at the concrete his father had swept every morning for 35 years. He stayed there for a long moment and did something he hadn't done since the funeral. He cried, not loudly, not dramatically. The specific, private kind of crying that a person does when they are genuinely broken, when the thing they were protecting has been damaged, and the body they were fighting with has been damaged, and the gap between what they intended and what. happened is so enormous that there is nothing useful to say about it, so the body just weeps quietly while the mind tries to find solid ground somewhere. Ease. He was still on the floor when he heard the door open. Ease. Samuel Reed moved fast for a 71-year-old man. Ease. He crossed the garage and was on his knees beside Ethan in seconds, his hands on Ethan's shoulders, looking at his face with an expression that was simultaneously calm and devastated. Ease. I saw the cars, Samuel said. I should have come sooner. Ease. I should have. Don't, Ethan said. Don't do that. Ease. How bad is the pain? Ethan said. Right side. Ease. At least 2. Breathing is manageable if I don't move fast. Ease. The Harley. Samuel looked at the motorcycle on the floor. Ease. He looked at it for a long moment without speaking. Ease, we'll fix it, Samuel said. Samuel, look at me, Samuel said. Ease. Ethan looked at him. Ease, what just happened in this garage? Ease, Samuel said. Ease, and his voice was steady in the way that an old river is steady, not calm exactly. Ease, but carrying an enormous amount of force in a controlled direction is going to be the worst day of your life for Victor Hale. Ease, do you understand me? What he just did in here is going to be the worst thing he has ever done for himself. Ease, he won, Ethan said. He came in here and he didn't win, Samuel said. Ease, he just made a move that cannot be taken back. What happened in this garage today is assault. Ease, witness intimidation, destruction of personal property. Ease, criminal threatening. He pulled out his phone. I need you to call Diana right now. Ease, and I need you to call the police. The police aren't going to. Ease, call them anyway, Samuel said firmly. Every single thing that happened in the last hour gets reported. He's photographed, documented. I was watching from my porch, Ethan. Ease, I saw 4 of them go in. I have the license plates from 2 of the vehicles. Ease, you have the recording function on your phone. Did you get any of it? Ease, Ethan's hand went automatically to his pocket. The phone was still there. Ease, he checked. He had started recording when he heard the 3 cars pull in. Ease, he hadn't stopped it. He had 11 minutes of audio from inside the garage. Ease, including Victor's voice, including the sounds of what happened. Ease, including he checked the moment Victor said, with unmistakable clarity, gentlemen. Ease, Samuel looked at the phone. Something moved in his eyes. Call Diana, he said again. Right now. Tell her everything. Ease, Ethan called. Ease, Diana picked up on the second ring. Ease, and when he started talking, ease, and she heard the pain in his breathing. Ease, she cut across him immediately. Ease, are you hurt? Ribs, 2, maybe 3 cracked. Have you called 911? Ease, not yet, do it now. Simultaneously put me on speaker and call 911 on another line. Ease, Ethan, this is no longer a civil matter. What you're describing is criminal assault and property damage by persons acting on behalf of a named party in our injunction case. Ease, this just changed everything. Her voice was doing something new. It had the bright, razor-edged quality of a lawyer who has just been handed exactly what she needed and knows exactly what to do with it. Ease, you said you have a recording? 11 minutes. Ease, a pause. Send it to me before you do anything else. Ease, before the police arrive. Right now, while we're talking. Ease, he sent it. He heard her phone chime on the other end of the line. Ease, Samuel Reed is here with me, Ethan said. He has plate numbers from 2 of the vehicles. Ease, Samuel, if you're listening, write down everything you saw with timestamps. Ease, everything. Time the cars arrived, time they left, what you observed from your position. Ease, you are a material witness. She paused. Ethan, you did the right things. Ease, you documented. You recorded, you stayed in that garage, and you did not give up. Ease. And now Victor Hale has handed us something that no filing, no injunction, no motion could have gotten us on its own. Another pause. Ease. He made it personal. He put his hands on you. And that is the thing that men like him cannot take back. Ease. She was still talking when the Silver Creek police arrived. Ease. The officer was a young woman named Sergeant Vance. Ease. She came in professionally calm, thorough, a clipboard in hand. Ease. She photographed the overturned Harley. She photographed Ethan's condition. She took his statement, ease. Then Samuel's statement, ease. Then listened to the recording on Ethan's phone without expression, ease. Though Ethan noticed her jaw tighten at the sound of Victor saying gentlemen, ease. When she was done, she looked at Ethan. You understand that based on what you've given me, this is an assault case, she said. Ease. Potentially aggravated, given the number of perpetrators. Ease. I'm going to need you to come to the station and give a formal statement. Ease. I understand, Ethan said. His ribs had stiffened considerably in the past 40 minutes, and each sentence was costing him something. But he sat straight and he met her eyes. Ease. We'll also need the recording transferred officially, she said. Ease. And Mr. Reed's witness statement in writing. Done, Samuel said immediately. Ease. Whatever you need. Sergeant Vance looked around the garage. Ease. She looked at the Harley lying on the floor. She looked at the workbench, the documentation folder open on the desk, the evidence of everything that had happened over the past 3 months. He's Mr. Carter, she said. The man who did this, Victor Hale. He's done this before? Yes, Ethan said. And this is the first time it got physical? First time with me. She wrote something in her notes. I'm going to be honest with you. A criminal complaint in a case like this, where the named suspect has resources, it takes time. The DA has to look at it. I'll push for priority given the nature of the injuries, but I can't promise you an arrest today. I know, Ethan said, but I will tell you this, what you have in that recording is significant. That voice saying, gentlemen, before 4 men assault you, is not circumstantial. That's direction. That's a man giving an order. She capped her pen. Whoever your attorney is, she should know about that specific moment. She already does, Ethan said. Sergeant Vance nodded once and left to call in her report. Samuel helped Ethan to the urgent care clinic on Mercer Street. 2 cracked ribs confirmed by x-ray, nothing punctured. 2 weeks of careful movement, and then brought him back to the garage because Ethan refused to go home and refused to close the doors and refused to be anywhere other than exactly where his father had built. They righted the Harley together carefully, not speaking much. Checked the frame, checked the engine. Damage was real, but not catastrophic. A cracked footboard, a scraped tank, the primary chain slightly displaced from the impact. Fixable, everything fixable. Ethan stood beside it with his hand on the tank and his ribs wrapped and his eyes clear. Samuel, he said, yes, make the calls. Tell them what happened today. Tell them I have cracked ribs and my father's motorcycle is on the floor, and Victor Hale walked out of my garage saying I should have taken the money. He paused. Tell them everything. Samuel looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. His hands, Ethan noticed for the first time, were completely steady. The hands of a man who has been waiting for exactly this moment and knows precisely what to do with it. He dialed. When the call connected, it happened today. 4 men. He's hurt. The motorcycle is down. A pause. He listened. Then how soon? Another pause. Samuel looked at Ethan. They're asking how soon you need them, Samuel said. Ethan thought about the insurance. 14 days. He thought about the injunction delay. He thought about Victor Hale's satisfied expression as he walked out of this garage. Now, Ethan said. Tell them now. Samuel spoke into the phone. Now. Silver Creek. Carter Auto Repair on Highway 87. He listened for one more moment. Then he slowly lowered the phone. His expression was not exactly calm. It was something else. Something older and more powerful than calm. The expression of a man who has watched things be wrong for a very long time and has just set something in motion that he knows, with absolute certainty, is right. They're coming, Samuel said. How many? The old man looked at him steadily. All of them, he said. Outside, the sun was going down over Silver Creek, Texas. The garage was quiet. The Harley stood upright again, damaged but intact, in the center of the floor. Ethan Carter stood beside it with 2 cracked ribs and 14 days left and the absolute conviction of a man who has not broken and will not break. And somewhere out there, across the long, flat roads of Texas and beyond, engines were starting. Hundreds of them. The first ones arrived before sunrise. Ethan heard them before he saw them, a low rolling thunder coming from the direction of the highway. Still distant, but unmistakable. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to weather or machinery, but carries something human inside it. He was sitting at his father's desk. Ribs wrapped. Unable to sleep. Going through the documentation folder for the 100th time, because it was the only thing that made him feel useful. Ease. When the sound reached him through the walls of the garage, he stood up slowly, careful, each movement a negotiation with his right side. Ease. He walked to the bay doors and opened them. The road was still dark. Ease. The town was still sleeping. Silver Creek at 4:30 in the morning was as quiet as a place can be, the specific hush of a small town that hasn't yet decided to be awake. Ease. Then the headlights appeared at the far end of Highway 87. Ease. Not one, not three. Ease. A line of them. Ease. Stretching back further than Ethan could see in the dark. Ease, moving in formation at a steady pace. Ease. Close enough together that the lights blurred into something continuous. Ease. He stood in the open bay door and watched them come and felt something happen in his chest that he did not have a name for, something between awe and gratitude, and the specific disorientation of a man who has been alone in a fight for so long that the arrival of help doesn't immediately feel real. They pulled in without chaos. That was the first thing that struck him. There was no showboating, no noise beyond the engines, no performance. They simply arrived and organized themselves with the practiced efficiency of people who have done this before, bikes lining up along the road, riders dismounting, moving with the quiet purpose of men who are here to do something specific and understand exactly what it is. The first man who walked up to Ethan was roughly 60, broad through the shoulders, with a gray beard and eyes that had the particular quality of someone who has seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by most of it. He stopped in front of Ethan and looked at him at the careful way he was standing, the slight forward lean that a person adopts when their ribs won't let them stand fully straight. You Carter? He said. Yes, sir, Ethan said. The man looked at him for a moment. Then he extended his hand. Ramos, Houston chapter. Samuel Reed rode with my father for 9 years. He shook Ethan's hand with a grip that was firm without being demonstrative. We heard what happened yesterday. I appreciate you coming, Ethan said. And then immediately felt like those words were nowhere near adequate for what was standing in front of him, which was somewhere between 40 and 50 men who had ridden through the night from Houston, Texas, for someone they had never met. Ramos seemed to understand the inadequacy and not hold it against him. Samuel here. He'll be here at 6, Ethan said. He doesn't know you arrived early. Something moved briefly in Ramos's face. That sounds like Samuel. He looked at the garage. This is the place? This is it. Ramos looked at it the way a man looks at something he's heard a story about and is now seeing for the first time, checking it against what he imagined, finding the reality both smaller and more significant than the idea of it. My father brought his bike to a shop like this once, Ramos said. He's outside of Corpus. Man who ran it treated him right when he didn't have to. Charged him honest when nobody would have blamed him for doing otherwise. He paused. Some things matter more than make sense. Ethan didn't say anything. He just stood there, in the open bay door of his father's garage, watching the road fill up with headlights. Samuel arrived at 5:58. He came around the side of the garage from his backyard the way he always did, in his jacket and his plain clothes, the 71-year-old retired postal worker who kept a vegetable garden and attended the same church for 35 years. He came around the corner and stopped. He stood absolutely still for a full 10 seconds. Ethan watched him. Watched the old man take in what was assembled along Highway 87 in the early morning dark, the rows of motorcycles. The riders moving around with coffee cups and quiet conversation. The Houston chapter. And beyond them, just beginning to arrive, the first vehicles from San Antonio, from Dallas, from further distances Ethan was still learning about. Samuel's face did something complicated, something that moved through several emotions too quickly to name individually, and arrived at an expression that Ethan had never seen on him before. Not quite grief, not quite pride. Something that lived between them, in the specific territory that belongs to a man who gave up something large and important a long time ago and has just discovered that it never entirely gave up him. Ramos walked towards Samuel. The two men looked at each other. Ramos was 49 years old, and Samuel had known him when he was a child, had known his father as a brother, and the weight of that history was visible in the space between them. Ramos extended his hand. Samuel took it. And then Ramos pulled him in and they embraced briefly. The way men do who share something that words don't cover. And when they separated, Samuel's jaw was tight and his eyes were bright. And he was working very hard to maintain the specific dignity of a man who has not cried in public since he was significantly younger. You shouldn't have come all this way, Samuel said. You sent the message, Ramos said simply. I didn't expect this. Not this many. You expected less because you forgot, Ramos said. Samuel, you were the one who taught most of us that a man's word means something. That when a brother calls, you answer. You taught that. You don't get to be surprised when it works. Samuel looked at him. Looked at the road behind him, looked at Ethan. My father's friend, he said to Ramos, nodding toward Ethan. Ramos nodded. We know. We heard. He's got cracked ribs and 14 days on his insurance and a corrupt developer who sent 4 men into this garage yesterday to break him. We know all of it, Ramos said. That's why we're here. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, what's the count? Last confirmation I had was 217. More coming. Oklahoma City is 2 hours out. New Mexico left at midnight. He paused. Denver chapter called me at 3 in the morning. They want to come, Denver, Samuel said quietly. They heard the story. They're coming, whether we ask them to or not. Ramos looked at the garage again. What do you need from us, Samuel? Tell us what this situation needs, and that's what we'll do. Samuel straightened his jacket. He glanced at Ethan. Something passed between them, not a conversation. Just the quick acknowledgement of 2 people who have been in it together and are now in a different phase of the same fight. We need presence, Samuel said. Legal, peaceful, visible presence. Victor Hale operates in the dark. He uses invisible pressure and deniable methods because sunlight is the one thing his operation cannot survive. We are going to put this garage in the most amount of sunlight it has ever had. He paused. We're also going to give the police, the district attorney, and Diana Reyes the kind of community support that makes a prosecutor look at a case differently than he might if a 25-year-old kid is fighting alone. Ramos nodded slowly. And Hale, when he shows up. He'll show up, Samuel said. Men like Victor don't retreat until they're forced to. He'll come, and when he does, he'll understand something that he has never understood before in his career, that the specific kind of community he tried to destroy doesn't disappear when you pressure it. It compresses, and compressed things have a force that spread out things don't. Ramos looked at him for a moment. You haven't changed at all, he said. 22 years and you still talk like you're settling the world's arguments. Samuel almost smiled. Almost. Go get some coffee, Samuel said. It's going to be a long day. By 8 in the morning, the count was over 170. Diana called Ethan at 8:15. He stepped away from the growing assembly and answered, wincing as the movement pulled at his ribs. I need you to tell me what is happening in Silver Creek right now, Diana said. Because I just got a call from the district attorney's office, and the person who called me sounded like someone who had looked out a window and seen something they weren't prepared for. There are some people here to show support, Ethan said. Some people, Diana repeated. Ethan. The DA's office has a window that faces Highway 87. The person who called me said there are motorcycles from the county line to the center of town. Ethan looked down the road. She wasn't wrong. It's a community response, he said. A pause. Does this community response have any potential to become a legal problem? No, Ethan said. These are people standing on public roads and private property with the property owner's permission. They are not obstructing traffic. They are not threatening anyone. They are simply present. Another pause, longer this time. The DA wants to meet with you today, Diana said, and her voice had changed from careful to something closer to electric. This morning, if possible. His assistant called it an informal conversation, but Ethan, the DA's office, does not call defense attorneys at 8 in the morning for informal conversations. Something shifted. Ethan's heart rate climbed. What shifted? I think your recording from yesterday shifted it, she said. I think the assault, and the documented pattern of interference and the fraudulent lien and the recording of Victor Hale directing 4 men to physically attack you, I think that was already enough to shift it. But I also think, she paused, that looking out a window and seeing what is apparently a very significant number of community members assembled in peaceful support of a crime victim tends to communicate to a district attorney that a case has public interest. So the numbers matter, Ethan said. Everything matters, Diana said. Can you be at the courthouse at 10? I'll be there. He walked back to Samuel and relayed the information. Samuel nodded once, with the specific satisfaction of a man watching events move in the direction he had envisioned. Samuel said, I'll be here. You'll be here with. Ethan looked at the road. I'll be here with whoever is here, Samuel said. Go talk to the DA. The district attorney's name was Philip Garrett, and he was 57 years old, a former defense attorney who had won his last 3 elections by margins that reflected a county's genuine trust in his judgment. He was not a man who frightened easily, and he was not a man who moved fast without reason. But he was also not a man who ignored what he could see with his own eyes. He had driven past Highway 87 that morning on his way to the courthouse. He sat across from Ethan and Diana in a conference room with a legal pad and a recorder, and the careful expression of a man in the process of making a significant decision. Diana had sent him the audio file at 6 that morning. He had listened to it twice before Ethan arrived. Mr. Carter, Garrett said, I want to be direct with you. What you have given us, the recording, the documented timeline of predatory interference, the witness account from Mr. Reed, the fraudulent lien documentation is a substantial body of evidence. More organized and more comprehensive than we typically receive from individuals who are not represented by law enforcement. He looked at the folder in front of him. Your attorney has done excellent work, and so have you. I was following instructions, Ethan said. Good instructions. Garrett leaned forward slightly. The recording from yesterday is what I want to discuss. The voice on the recording directing 4 men to physically intimidate you, you are prepared to testify that is Victor Hale's voice. Without any question, Ethan said. I have spoken to that man face-to-face on 4 separate occasions. I know his voice, and the instruction, gentlemen, immediately preceding the assault. Yes. Garrett wrote something. He looked at Diana. The fraudulent lien, you have the paper trail connecting Meridian to Hale's management company. Filing records going back to 2019, Diana said. I can have the full document package on your desk by noon. Garrett was quiet for a moment. He looked at Ethan. The insurance cancellation, he said. I want to be direct about something. My office has been aware of Victor Hale's development practices for some time. There have been complaints. Nothing that rose to the level of criminal prosecution because individually, each piece was too small or too ambiguous. The Vietnamese family in the East County 3 years ago, he stopped. That case never got to us because the family was afraid and didn't document and didn't have legal representation. Ethan looked at him steadily. How many families before them? Garrett held his gaze. Enough that your file is not the first time I've seen this pattern. It is, however, the first time I've seen it this thoroughly documented. He paused. And the first time it ended with an assault on the record. So what happens now? Ethan asked. What happens now is that I'm going to assign this case to my senior assistant DA today. We're going to issue a criminal summons for Victor Hale on assault charges. We're going to open a parallel investigation into the fraudulent lien. And we're going to look very carefully at the insurance cancellation and the county assessment. Because if your documentation shows what I think it shows, those actions may constitute criminal conspiracy, in addition to the civil violations. The room was very quiet. Ethan had spent 3 months learning not to let hope get ahead of reality. He was careful with it now, feeling it rise and keeping his hand on it. The insurance, he said. I have 14 days. Garrett looked at him. I understand. I cannot reverse the cancellation. That's a civil matter between you and the insurer. But I can tell you that a criminal investigation of Victor Hale is going to create a very different atmosphere for that insurance company's decision-making. Companies that cancel policies at the request of a man under criminal investigation tend to revisit those decisions rapidly. Diana put her hand briefly on Ethan's arm, just for a moment. He understood it. Thank you, Ethan said to Garrett. For taking this seriously. I should have taken it seriously 3 years ago, Garrett said. When the family in East County came to my office, he paused. He looked at his legal pad. I'm going to ask you something directly, Mr. Carter, the assembly on Highway 87 this morning that's going to generate attention. Local news has already called my office twice. I want to understand what that is, who organized it, and whether it's going to remain what you described to my assistant peaceful and legal. It will remain exactly that, Ethan said. These are people who came because they heard about what was happening and decided they weren't going to stand by. They're not here to threaten anyone. They're here to make sure that what happened in my garage yesterday is visible. That it's not quiet. That Victor Hale can't pretend it didn't happen. He looked at Garrett directly. You said men like him operate in the dark. These people are light. Garrett looked at him for a long moment. Then he wrote something on his legal pad, tore the sheet off, and pushed it across the table. It was a direct number. His cell phone. If anything escalates, Garrett said. If Hale makes another move, you call that number directly. Not the main office, that number. Ethan folded the paper and put it in his pocket. By the time he got back to the garage, the count had passed 250. He stood at the entrance to the parking lot and looked at what Silver Creek, Texas had become over the course of a single morning. And he felt something shift inside him, the specific internal movement of a man who has been fighting alone for so long that he has unconsciously begun to believe that alone is the only available condition, and is now being forced to update that belief with the evidence of his own eyes. They were everywhere, lined along the road in both directions. In the parking lot and beyond it. Men of various ages, various origins, various chapters and chapters of chapters. Some were talking. Some were just sitting. Some were helping Earl Hutchins, who had showed up at 7:30 with a truck full of coffee thermoses and 100 sandwiches his wife had apparently made, starting at 5 in the morning. Because that was what Silver Creek people did when something needed doing. Marcus was there. He was standing near his car looking slightly stunned, which was reasonable. He caught Ethan's eye and walked over and said, without preamble, man. Who are these people, brothers? Ethan said. Marcus looked at the road. These brothers, he repeated. Of who? Of someone who was friends with my dad. Ethan watched the road for a moment. And of anyone who's ever stood up for something they shouldn't have had to fight for, alone. Marcus was quiet. Then, in a voice that had lost most of its characteristic looseness, and was carrying something more honest than Ethan had heard from him in years, he said, I should have been here sooner. When this whole thing started, I told you to sell and I was wrong. You were being practical, Ethan said. I was being a coward dressed up as practical, Marcus said. There's a difference. He paused. I'm here now. I know, Ethan said. Go get some of Earl's coffee. Ramos found him 20 minutes later. DA meeting go well? He asked. Criminal summons is being prepared, Ethan said. Ramos nodded, unsurprised. The numbers help with that. The recording helps with that, Ethan said. The numbers make it visible. That's what we're for, Ramos said simply. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it. Something shifted in his expression, not alarm, but the alert stillness of a man receiving important information. Denver just arrived at the county line, he said. 43 riders. He looked up. And we just got a confirmation from a chapter in Louisiana. They've been riding since last night. Ethan stared at him. Louisiana, he said. Your story went wide, Ramos said. The assault on a young mechanic defending his dead father's garage. A corrupt developer. An old man who sent a message after 22 years of silence. These things, he stopped, searching for the right word. These things resonate. You'd be surprised how many men out there have been looking for a reason to believe that showing up still matters. Samuel appeared beside them. He had been moving through the assembly for the past 2 hours. Shaking hands. Embracing old brothers being what he had been 22 years ago in a way that seemed simultaneously natural and extraordinary. He looked at Ramos's phone. Louisiana, Samuel said quietly. Yes, Ramos said. Samuel looked down the road. 347 confirmed, he said. As of 20 minutes ago. Still counting. 347. Ethan stood between these two men, the young mechanic, with cracked ribs and grease under his fingernails, and his father's unfinished motorcycle behind him. And the old man who had walked away from this world, and this world had come back to him across 22 years and 12 states, and he felt something that he would carry for the rest of his life. Not victory, not yet. But the specific grounding knowledge that what his father had stood for, the honest work, the fair price, the refusal to cheat ordinary people, had accumulated into something real. Something that had weight and presence and the kind of power that money could not manufacture. His father had been right. Some things were worth protecting. And sometimes the act of protecting them called up forces that surprised everyone, including the man standing in the middle of them. His phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then something, instinct or whatever passes for it, made him answer. Mr. Carter. The voice was professional. Male, slightly tense. My name is James Whitfield. I'm with the Texas Insurance Commissioner's office. I've been asked to contact you regarding the cancellation of your business liability policy. Ethan stood completely still. I'm listening, he said. We've received information suggesting that the cancellation of your policy may have been influenced by improper external pressure, the man said carefully. The commissioner's office has opened a preliminary inquiry. In the meantime, we are requesting that the insurer issue a temporary continuation of coverage pending the outcome of the inquiry. They have been informed of this request. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. What does that mean for my 14-day deadline, he asked. It means, Whitfield said carefully, that as of this morning, your policy cancellation has been suspended. Your coverage continues while the inquiry proceeds. You will receive formal written confirmation within 24 hours. The sound Ethan made was not quite a word. It was the sound a man makes when something he has been bracing against for weeks suddenly stops pushing. Thank you, he managed. Mr. Carter, the inquiry will take time. This isn't a permanent resolution, but your immediate deadline has been addressed. A pause. Someone apparently flagged your situation to the commissioner's office this morning. I was told it came through a DA's office contact. Garrett. Philip Garrett had moved fast. I understand, Ethan said. Thank you. He hung up. He stood there for a moment. In the middle of everything that was happening, the road full of motorcycles. The DA preparing a criminal summons. Samuel shaking hands with men he hadn't seen in decades. Earl Hutchins handing out sandwiches, and he breathed. Carefully, around the ribs. But fully, he called Diana. She picked up before the first ring completed, which told him she had been waiting. The insurance commissioner's office just called me, he said. I know, she said. Garrett called me 12 minutes ago. A pause. He could hear her smiling. The cancellation is suspended. Yes. Which means the primary deadline that Victor's entire strategy was built around gone. Her voice was doing the electric thing again. He spent 3 months engineering a clock, Ethan. And this morning someone turned the clock off. What does he do now? Ethan asked. He either retreats and hopes the criminal case doesn't reach him, which it will, or he doubles down, which is what men like him almost always do when they're cornered, because they've never learned how to retreat gracefully. She paused. My money is on doubling down. Mine too, Ethan said. When that happens, Diana said, we are ready. We have the recording. We have the documentation. We have a district attorney who is personally invested in this case. And from what I understand, you have something else on that road outside your garage that Victor Hale has never encountered in 20 years of doing this. What's that? Ethan said. A community that decided it wasn't going to be quiet, Diana said. That's the one thing his playbook has no page for. Ethan hung up and turned around. Samuel was standing 10 feet away, waiting, watching him with those steady old eyes. He's the insurance suspension, Samuel said. Somehow he already knew. He's? Yes, Ethan Samuel nodded slowly, breathed out. He's looked down the road at the 347 men who had come from Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Oklahoma City and New Mexico and Denver and Louisiana because a 71-year-old retired postal worker had sent a message. And a 25-year-old mechanic had refused to walk away from his father's garage. Your father would have something to say right now, Samuel said. What do you think he'd say? Ethan asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then the ghost of something, not quite a smile, but the shape that a smile leaves behind, crossed his face. He'd say, I told you some things were worth fighting for. He looked at Ethan. And then he'd probably tell everyone to stop blocking the driveway because he has cars to fix. Ethan laughed. It hurt his ribs considerably. He didn't care. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was a local number. Silver Creek, he answered. Mr. Carter? A woman's voice. He's older, slightly breathless, like someone who has been moving fast. This is Carol Simmons. I'm a reporter with the Silver Creek Gazette. I'm standing on Highway 87 and I need to understand what I'm looking at. Can you talk to me? Ethan looked at Samuel. Samuel gave the smallest nod. Yes, Ethan said. I can talk to you. Come to the garage. He hung up. He squared his shoulders, careful of the ribs. The Gazette was local. But local stories, when they were the right stories, had a way of traveling. And this story was already traveling further than anyone had planned. Down the road, a new group of riders was appearing at the edge of town. Ethan squinted against the morning light, trying to count. Too many to count easily. Samuel appeared at his shoulder. Louisiana? Ethan asked. Louisiana, Samuel confirmed. And behind them, he paused, and his voice carried something that Ethan had never heard in it before, something that might have been wonder. I just got a text from a chapter in Arkansas. They left at 3 in the morning. Ethan stood at the door of his father's garage and watched the road fill up. 347. And still counting. Victor Hale had one move left. And somewhere across Silver Creek, in whatever office or hotel room he was using to run his operation, he was about to learn something that 20 years of acquiring properties and breaking small business owners had never taught him. Some fights cannot be won with money. Some ground cannot be taken. Some garages and the men who stand in them are simply immovable. Carol Simmons was 53 years old and had been writing for the Silver Creek Gazette for 21 years, and she had never in those 21 years walked into a story that felt like this one felt. She came through the garage's side door with a notepad and a recorder, and the professional composure of a woman who had covered everything from county commissioner scandals to tornado damage. And she stopped just inside the door and took in the scene. Ethan Carter standing at his father's workbench, ribs wrapped, face carrying the specific worn steadiness of someone who has been in a sustained fight and is still on their feet. And she said, before she could stop herself, how are you still standing? Carefully, Ethan said. She sat down across from him and put her recorder on the workbench and looked at him. Tell me everything, she said, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out, so he told her. He had told the story enough times now that he could do it without losing the thread, without the emotion overtaking the facts, though the emotion was still there underneath every sentence. The 3 months, the suppliers, the rumors, the inspector, the lien, the insurance, the man in the plain sedan with the flat eyes, Victor Hale standing over him on the concrete floor of his father's garage, saying, you should have taken the money. He told her about Samuel. He told her about the message that traveled. He told her about Diana and the DA and the insurance commissioner and the recording. Carol wrote and listened and did not interrupt once. When he finished, she looked at her notes for a moment. Then she looked at him. The motorcycle, she said. Your father's Harley, can I see it? Ethan walked her to it. The tarp was off. It had been off since Samuel and Ethan had righted it the previous afternoon, and Ethan had spent part of the night cleaning the scrapes on the tank. He's working around his ribs with the slow care of a man who needs to do something with his hands while his mind works. He's. It was not finished, but it was standing. And in the early morning light of the garage, it looked like what it was 35 years of one man's character, compressed into steel and chrome, an unfinished promise. Ease. Carol looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Ease. Then she said quietly, "Your father never got to finish it." Ease. "No," Ethan said. "Are you going to?" "Yes," Ethan said. Without hesitation, without qualification. "Yes, I am." Ease. She looked at him. She wrote something. She clicked off her recorder, looked at it for a moment, and then clicked it back on. Ease. "One more question," she said. "Off the record, if you want." Ease. "But I'd like it on the record if you're willing." She paused. Ease. "When Victor Hale had you on the floor of this garage, hurt, your father's motorcycle knocked over, was there a moment when you thought about giving up?" Ease. The garage was quiet. Ethan thought about the question honestly, the way it deserved to be thought about. Ease. "There was a moment," he said slowly, "when I understood that I might lose. Ease. That the math might not work out, that a man with enough money and enough patience and enough willingness to hurt people can grind down almost anything." He looked at the Harley. Ease. "But giving up and losing aren't the same thing. Giving up is a choice. Ease. Losing is just what happens sometimes when you were fighting something bigger than yourself." He paused. Ease. "My dad never gave up a single day in 35 years. Ease. Not when the equipment broke down and he couldn't afford to replace it. Not when a supplier cheated him. Not when he was exhausted and the money was thin and every rational voice probably told him to sell and move on." He looked at Carol. Ease. "He just came in every morning and opened the doors." Ease. "That's all he did. That's what I was trying to do." Ease. Carol nodded once. She clicked off her recorder. "Thank you," she said. Ease. She left the garage and walked out to Highway 87. Ease. And Ethan watched through the open bay doors as she stopped at the edge of the road and stood there for a moment. Ease. Looking at the length of it, the motorcycles. Ease. The riders. Ease. The community assembled in the Texas morning, and he saw her lift her camera and start photographing. Ease. He had a feeling the Silver Creek Gazette's circulation was about to extend considerably beyond Silver Creek. Ease. Victor Hale found out about the criminal summons at 9:47 in the morning. Ease. His attorney called him, and the conversation was brief and not what Victor was accustomed to receiving from the people he paid for results. Ease. The DA's office issued a criminal summons, the attorney said. Ease. Assault, directing others to commit assault, an intimidation of a crime victim. Ease. The recording they have is a pause that carried more information than the pause should have, substantial. Victor. The recording is very bad. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Ease. How bad? Your voice, clearly identifiable, giving a one-word direction immediately before 4 men physically attacked the property owner. He's in his own garage, which he owned, where you had no legal right to be. Another pause. Ease. His attorney is also filing a motion to lift the injunction delay based on the new criminal matter. Ease. When that hits Judge Caraway's desk, he's going to grant it. Ease. The temporary restraining order goes into effect, probably today. Ease. The insurance lapse. The insurance commissioner's office suspended the cancellation this morning. His coverage continues pending inquiry. The attorney's voice had the careful quality of someone delivering a series of blows and trying to do it professionally. Ease. Victor. The clock you built is gone. The legal strategy that depended on the clock is gone. Ease. And you're now the subject of a criminal investigation. Ease. Victor sat with this information. He had been in difficult positions before. Ease. He was a man who operated in gray areas and understood that gray areas occasionally produced unwanted friction. Ease. He had dealt with regulators, with angry property owners, with local attorneys who thought they could make a name at his expense. Ease. He had always found a way through. Ease. Because the fundamental advantage had always been on his side: more money. Ease. More time. Ease. More patience than his opposition. Ease. But this was different. The recording was different. Ease. He had said "gentlemen" out loud. Ease. In a man's garage. Ease. With 4 hired men standing behind him. Ease. And it had been captured and delivered to a district attorney who had apparently decided this was the case he was going to make his name on. Ease. That was a different category of problem from everything else. Ease. What are my options? He said. His attorney was quiet for a moment that lasted a half-second too long. Please. Honestly, the attorney said, at this point, your cleanest option is to approach Carter directly. Please. Not through intermediaries. Please. You personally, please, with a genuine offer to settle full withdrawal of the lien. Please, restoration of the insurance. Please, compensation for the assault and the documented business interference. Please. Make it large enough that it's real. A pause. And then you talk to my criminal colleague about the summons, because that's a separate matter, and it's not going away. Please. Victor said nothing. Victor, the attorney said, there are 350 motorcycles on Highway 87 in Silver Creek right now. Please. The local paper is there. I'm told the Austin American-Statesman has a reporter on the way. Please. This is no longer a quiet acquisition dispute. This is a story. Please. And stories about corrupt developers assaulting 25-year-old mechanics who are trying to protect their dead father's garage. The attorney stopped. Please. They don't end well for the developer. Please. Ethan was in the garage at 10:30 when Samuel came to find him. Please. Samuel moved with the unhurried certainty of a man who has been watching events unfold and has arrived at the moment he was watching for. He's coming, Samuel said. Ethan looked up from the Harley. He had been working on it carefully. Around the ribs. But working because it felt right to be doing his father's work on his father's motorcycle on this particular morning. In this particular garage. Surrounded by this particular gathering of people. Victor? Ethan said. His car was spotted at the county line 20 minutes ago. Samuel sat on the stool at the end of the workbench. He's coming alone. No hired men. Just a driver. Ethan set down the wrench. He breathed carefully. He thought about what Diana had said. He either retreats or doubles down. He thought about what Ramos had said when he arrived in the dark before sunrise. You'd be surprised how many men out there have been looking for a reason to believe that showing up still matters. Samuel, Ethan said, when he gets here, I want to be the one who talks to him. Just me. Looked at him for a moment. That's your call. I know. I'm making it. Ethan paused. He came for one man. He came for me specifically because he thought one man was manageable. I want him to look at one man when this is over. Samuel nodded slowly. The kind of nod that is more than agreement, the kind that means I see exactly what you're doing, and I respect it. I'll be outside, Samuel said. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out. Ethan heard him say something in a low voice to Ramos. Heard the crowd shift slightly, a subtle collective adjustment, the way a room adjusts when something is about to happen. Ethan picked up the wrench again. He kept working on the Harley. He was still working when Victor Hale walked through the bay doors 10 minutes later. Victor looked different. That was the first thing Ethan registered. Not physically different, same silver hair, same expensive understated clothes. But the thing that had always been underneath the pleasantness, the controlled certainty of a man who has never had a problem he couldn't buy his way through, was gone. He's not replaced by fear exactly, by something more complex than fear. The specific expression of a man who has looked at what is standing in front of him and is processing for the first time that he fundamentally misjudged the situation he created. He stood in the door of the garage and looked around at it, the workbench, the documentation folder open on the desk, the Harley standing upright in the center of the floor, with Ethan Carter kneeling beside it, and something moved across his face that Ethan thought might have been the closest thing to shame Victor Hale was capable of feeling. He did not have hired men behind him. He did not have transfer papers in his jacket. He stood alone in the door of the garage that he had spent 3 months trying to destroy. And he said, Carter, can we talk? Ethan set down the wrench. He stood up slowly, careful of the ribs, and he looked at Victor Hale across the garage. Close the door, Ethan said. Victor came in. He didn't close the bay door, couldn't. It was the rolling kind, but he let it stand between them and the road, between this conversation and the 350 people assembled outside. He looked at Ethan's ribs, at the wrap visible under the edge of Ethan's shirt. Something moved in his face. I want to apologize, Victor said. And the words came out with the difficulty of something that had been rehearsed, but was still genuinely hard to say which told Ethan that whatever else Victor Hale was, he was not entirely without the capacity for it. Please, tell me what you're apologizing for, Ethan said. Please, evenly, not meanly. He genuinely wanted to hear it. Please. Victor was quiet for a moment. What happened in this garage yesterday was not something I intended to. He stopped. Tried again. The men I hired were supposed to deliver a message. Please, not to physically. They cracked 2 of my ribs, Ethan said. Please. On the floor of my father's garage, and you stood over me and told me I should have taken the money. He looked at Victor steadily. Please, so I'd like you to be specific about what you're apologizing for. Please, because not what I intended is not the same as wrong. Please. Victor looked at him. The silence stretched. I was wrong, Victor said finally. Please, quietly. The way a man says something that is true and has cost him something to say. Please, what I did to you, the suppliers. Please, the rumors. Please, the lien. Please, the inspector, all of it. Please, it was wrong. And what happened to you physically in this garage was, he stopped. It was wrong. Please, I am responsible for it. I directed those men into your property. Please, I understand what gentleman means on a recording when it precedes 4 men attacking one. Please. Ethan didn't say anything. I want to offer you a settlement, Victor said. Please, a genuine one. Not a pressure tactic, not a deadline. Please. A real offer. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope and held it out. Please. Full withdrawal of the Meridian lien. A letter to the insurance commissioner confirming that the cancellation request originated from improper pressure and requesting full restoration of your policy. Please. Compensation for the business losses you've sustained over the past 3 months, and 4, he paused, for your injuries. Please. The number in that envelope is what my attorney tells me a jury would likely award you and more. Please. Ethan did not take the envelope. What about the county tax revaluation, he said. Please. Victor blinked slightly. I'll make a call. What about the Vietnamese family from East County 3 years ago? Please. The nail salon. A pause. They lost their business, Ethan said. Please. They didn't document. They didn't have representation. They didn't have 350 people on the highway behind them. Please, they lost, and you moved on. He looked at Victor. Please, what about them? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Please, I can find them, he said slowly. I can make that right. Please. That's not a settlement condition, Ethan said. That's a separate moral obligation. Please. I'm just telling you that I know about them, and Diana Reyes knows about them. Please. And Philip Garrett knows about them. He let that sit for a moment. Please. What happens with the criminal summons isn't something I control. Please. That's the DA's office. That's the law. You're going to have to answer for what you did in this garage, with or without my cooperation, because the recording is evidence, and Victor Hale, on a recording directing an assault, is not something a DA walks away from. Please, I understand that, Victor said. Then what are you here for? Ethan asked. Please. If you understand the criminal matter isn't mine to give you. Please. Victor looked at him for a long time. And in that look, Ethan saw something that surprised him, not calculation, not strategy, but something almost honest. Please. The look of a man who has built 20 years of his life on the premise that everything and everyone has a price, and who is standing in a garage where that premise has been comprehensively disproved, and who is trying to understand what that means. Please. I'm here, Victor said, because I want you to know that I understand what I did. Please. Not just legally, I understand what I tried to take from you. He looked at the Harley. Please. At the workbench. At the walls of the garage. Your father built something real here. Please. Something that doesn't have a dollar value. And I tried to erase it because it was in my way. He stopped. Please, that was wrong. Not just illegal, wrong. The garage was very quiet. Please. Ethan looked at the man in front of him, the silver hair, the expensive clothes, the careful apology that had cost him something real to deliver, and he did something that surprised both of them. Please. He took the envelope, not to look at the number. He didn't open it. Please. He held it and looked at Victor and said, I'm going to have Diana review this. Please. If the terms are what you said, the lien, the insurance, the compensation, she'll contact your attorney. Please. The settlement is separate from the criminal matter. Please. You understand that? Yes, Victor said. And the family in East County. Please. That happens. Not as a condition of this. As a separate thing that you do because it's right. Please. Victor nodded. Then I think we're done here, Ethan said. Ease. Victor looked at him for one more moment. There was something in the look that was almost not respect, exactly, but the near relative of respect. Ease. The expression of a man who encountered something he didn't expect and is honest enough to acknowledge it, even if only to himself. Ease. He turned and walked out through the bay doors. And the moment he stepped outside into the sight of 350 men standing along Highway 87, he stopped. Ethan watched from inside the garage. Watched Victor Hale stand in the door of Carter Auto Repair and look at what had assembled there, the Houston chapter and the Dallas chapter and the San Antonio chapter, and the men from New Mexico and Oklahoma City and Denver and Louisiana and Arkansas. The riders who had come through the night because a 22-year-old message from a quiet old man still carried weight across 12 states. The community that had decided it was not going to be silent. The organic, unstoppable human force that money could not buy and fear could not manufacture. Victor stood there for a long time. Nobody said anything to him. Nobody moved toward him. They just stood there, present and still and absolute, and let him understand what he was looking at. Then he walked to his car and got in and drove away. The sound that went through the crowd when the car disappeared was not a cheer exactly. It was something more considered than a cheer. The release of a long collective breath. The specific sound a group of people makes when something is over that they were not certain was going to end. Ramos walked to the bay door and looked at Ethan. Done? He said. His part is done, Ethan said. The DA still has his part. Good, Ramos said simply. Samuel came in. He walked across the garage and stopped in front of Ethan and looked at him with those old, steady, complicated eyes. How do you feel? He asked. Ethan thought about it honestly. Like two cracked ribs, he said. And like I just had a conversation I'm going to think about for a long time. He apologized? He did. Imperfectly, but genuinely, I think. Samuel nodded slowly. Men like Victor, they don't often get to that point. Something about this situation. He looked around the garage, at the road beyond it, made him arrive somewhere he hadn't been before. He paused. Your father would have something to say about that too. What? That people can surprise you, Samuel said. Even the ones who've been wrong for a long time, he believed that. 35 years of fixing people's cars. He held on to that. He looked at Ethan. He passed it on. Ethan didn't trust himself to say anything for a moment. Diana called at 11:45. She had the envelope's terms in front of her. Victor's attorney had sent the full document package 40 minutes after Victor left the garage, which meant it had been prepared in advance. Which meant some part of Victor had known before he arrived that this was how it was going to end. The lien withdrawal is clean, Diana said. The insurance letter is comprehensive. It's actually stronger than what the commissioner's office needed, which means your policy is not just restored. It's restored with a formal acknowledgement of improper interference that goes into the insurer's file. A pause. The compensation figure is. She stopped. He could hear her recalibrating whatever she had been about to say. It's significant, Ethan. More than I would have expected. It's enough to fix the roof. That's enough to replace the hydraulic lift in Bay 2 and update the equipment and pay off the outstanding debts with a margin left over. Ethan sat down on the overturned bucket. Is it real? He said. Is this actually happening? It's real, Diana said. I'll review the full document this afternoon. There may be minor terms to negotiate. But the substance is what he told you. She paused. And Ethan. The DA called me 20 minutes ago. Garrett's office is moving forward with the criminal case, regardless of the civil settlement. Victor Hale is going to have to answer for what he did in that garage. That process is going to take time, but it's moving. Good, Ethan said. It should move. Yes, Diana said. It should. Another pause. And when she spoke again, something in her voice was different, warmer. More personal. The sound of a professional who has fought a long fight and is allowing herself a moment of something outside the professional register. You built this, Ethan. The documentation, the recording, the evidence. You built it one day at a time while you were fighting on every other front simultaneously. That's what made this possible. Not the 350 people on the highway, though I will tell you that walking past that road this morning was one of the more extraordinary things I've seen in 20 years of this work." She stopped. "Please, you did this. You and your father's stubbornness and your father's way of treating people. That's what built this." Ethan held the phone for a moment after she hung up. He held it, and he thought about his father. About 5:15 in the morning. About the 30 minutes with the Harley before the first customer arrived. About 35 years of opening the doors because some things were worth protecting. About the farmers and the truck drivers and the single mothers and the veterans on fixed incomes who knew that Carter Auto Repair was the one place on the highway they could go and not be cheated. He got up from the bucket. He walked to the Harley. He picked up the wrench. Ramos found him there an hour later. Working steadily. Carefully. A man with 2 cracked ribs doing precise mechanical work because the work needed doing and the man doing it had decided that was simply what was going to happen. "We're going to start heading out," Ramos said. "People have their own roads." Ethan set down the wrench and stood up and extended his hand. Ramos took it, held it, looked at Ethan with those seen enough of the world eyes. "Samuel told us about your father," Ramos said. "About how he fixed his bike. He's about the $60. He paused. "My father had a story like that too. Different man, different shop, different town. But the same story." He shook Ethan's hand once, firmly. "The men who do the honest work, they matter more than they know. More than people tell them. You just got to see it for yourself." Ethan looked at him. "Thank you," he said, "for coming. For everyone who came. I don't have words for what that." "You don't need words," Ramos said. "Samuel needed help once and we weren't there. We were there for you. That's how it balances." He let go of Ethan's hand. "Fix that motorcycle," Ethan said. Ramos walked out. The sound of the engine starting was something Ethan would carry with him for the rest of his life. Not the sound of departure, the sound of people who came when called and are now returning to their own lives, their own roads, their own long chapters. There is a kind of generosity in that sound. The generosity of people who gave something freely and asked nothing in return and leave without making it a larger moment than it needs to be. He listened until the sound faded into the ordinary noise of a Texas morning. Then Samuel came and stood beside him. They stood together in the quiet for a moment. The old man who had walked away from one life and built another and had been called back, briefly, to a version of himself he had set aside. The young man who had refused to walk away from anything. "What do you do now?" Samuel asked. "Fix the motorcycle," Ethan said. "Fix the lift in Bay 2, fix the roof." He paused. "Open the doors tomorrow morning at 6. Samuel looked at him. "That's it, that's everything," Ethan said. Samuel was quiet for a moment. The specific quiet of a man who has heard the right answer and is letting it settle. "Your father would be proud," Samuel said. Ethan's jaw tightened briefly. He nodded once. "I know," he said. "I know he would." 11 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in October, when the Texas air had finally come down from its summer heights, and the highway carried a cool edge that made you want to be outdoors, Ethan Carter fired up his father's Harley for the first time. He had finished it the week before. Working in the mornings before the garage opened. The same 30 minutes his father had kept. The same quiet, deliberate work across the months. And then more than 30 minutes as the end came into sight. Because once you can see the finish line, you don't ease up, you push, not from panic, but from purpose, from the knowledge that some things you don't leave unfinished. He finished it on a Thursday evening, just as the light outside was going gray. He sat back on his heels and looked at it and didn't say anything for a long time. He called Samuel. The old man came over and sat on the stool and looked at the completed Harley, and neither of them spoke for a while. Then Samuel said, "Robert would have been up all night." "I know," Ethan said. "He'd have wanted to hear it run." "Tomorrow morning," Samuel said. "Tomorrow morning," Ethan agreed. And so on a Saturday in October, with the new hydraulic lift operational in Bay 2, and the roof sealed against the coming winter and the equipment upgraded and the documentation folder archived as evidence in the DA's ongoing case against Victor Hale, Ease. Ethan Carter pushed the Harley out through the bay doors onto the morning air and checked everything one final time with the deliberate thoroughness of a mechanic who was trained right, and then he kicked the starter. The engine caught on the second kick. It ran. Not just ran, it sang. The specific deep rolling sound of a well-built engine coming alive for the first time. Finding its rhythm. The product of 35 years of one man's intention and 14 months of another man's faithfulness. The sound filled the parking lot and went out onto the highway and kept going, the way sound does in open Texas air, traveling further than you expect. Samuel stood in the bay door with his hands in his jacket pockets and listened. His eyes were bright. He didn't say anything. Earl Hutchins, who happened to be walking his dog past the garage at that exact moment, stopped on the sidewalk and listened, and then looked at the garage and looked at Ethan and said, "Is that Robert Carter's motorcycle?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said. Earl stood there for a moment. He put his hand over his chest, briefly, in the way that men of a certain generation do when something hits them in a place they don't have a word for. Then he nodded once and kept walking. Ethan let the engine run for a while, listening to his father's work, feeling through the handlebars the specific pulse of something completed, something promised and kept. He thought about the $60 and the honest labor and the farmers and the veterans and the small planter that some places are defined not by what they are, but by how they treat people. He thought about Victor Hale, who was currently navigating a criminal case that Diana had told him was moving forward steadily and professionally, and with the full weight of a DA who had decided this was the case that mattered. Victor was not in prison, not yet. But he was answering for what he had done, methodically and publicly. And the Vietnamese family from East County had received a certified letter from Victor's attorney 6 weeks earlier with a number that made them cry. According to what their daughter had told Diana, who had told Ethan. That mattered, not as much as it should have, because it was late and they had suffered. But it mattered. It was something. He thought about Diana, who had taken the case on faith and built it to something real. And who had called him the week after everything resolved and said, simply, "I'm going to use your documentation process as the model for every small business owner I represent from here forward. You built a better template than my office had." He thought about Ramos and the men who rode through the night from Houston, and the men from Dallas and San Antonio and Oklahoma City and New Mexico and Denver and Louisiana and Arkansas. 350 of them assembled on Highway 87 because a 71-year-old retired postal worker had sent a message, and the message had found the exact chord it needed to find in exactly the right hearts. He thought about what Ramos had said, the men who do the honest work matter more than they know. He thought about his father, Robert Carter, who had swept this floor every morning for 35 years and charged $60 for labor that was worth $60 and no more. And who had never once, not once in all those years given a person less than the full honesty of what they paid for. He let the engine idle down. He sat on the motorcycle his father had started, and he had finished, and he let the silence after the engine settle around him. Samuel walked over from the bay door. He stood beside the Harley and put his hand on the tank for a moment, and Ethan saw that the old man's hand was trembling slightly. Not from age, from something else. The specific trembling of a person touching something that cost them something to touch. He would have ridden it to the county line and back before breakfast, Samuel said. I know, Ethan said. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Samuel looked at him. Then he stepped back. Go, he said. Ethan started the engine. He rode out of the parking lot and onto Highway 87, and he rode his father's motorcycle down the long, flat Texas road as the morning opened up around him, the cool October air and the wide sky and the town of Silver Creek falling away behind him. He rode past the point where the first headlights had appeared in the dark before sunrise, that long line of light that had come toward him like a promise being kept. He rode to the county line and stopped for a moment. He sat on the motorcycle his father built and looked back down the highway toward the garage. He could see it from here, small from this distance. Ease. Just a building at the side of the road. Nothing about it announced what it was, or what had happened there, or what it meant to the people who had passed through it in 35 years. It was just a garage. But some places are not defined by what they look like from the outside. Some places are defined by what they mean to the people who kept them alive when keeping them alive cost something. Ethan Carter turned the Harley around. He rode back to Silver Creek. He pulled into the parking lot of Carter Auto Repair, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the quiet. Then he walked inside, picked up a wrench, and got to work. The doors were open. They would stay open. That was his father's promise. And it was his promise. And no amount of money, or fear, or corrupt power had been able to break it, because some things, once built with enough honesty and enough stubbornness and enough love, simply cannot be destroyed. And Silver Creek, Texas, never forgot the morning 350 men rode in to remind the world of that truth.